One Piece has some of the most memorable character introductions in anime and manga, and for certain arcs and sagas, they're the most impactful moments by far. So for this video, we're gonna take a look and try to rank the top 10 best character introductions in One Piece. So let's not waste any time and get straight into it. At number 10, I have Ace. When Ace first appeared in a flashback during Drum Island, we didn't really have a good view of him or his design. He was shrouded in his cloak. He was this man of mystery. What we did know is that he was looking for Blackbeard, and Blackbeard himself hadn't been fully introduced yet. But the thing is, if you know about pirates, you know Blackbeard from the real world. You know how infamous he is. You know how he's basically the poster child of piracy. All things considered, you would have probably thought the Blackbeard was the most powerful character in the series just off the name alone. But think, maybe this is Luffy's final fight. Maybe this is the one person he has to fight in the end in order to become the king of the pirates. That's how much deep thought came from this one moment. But the fact that Ace was looking for him, how powerful could Ace be? What's his role in the story moving forward? But even beyond that, why is he looking for Luffy? At this point, we had no idea if he was friend or foe, so it felt like there was a lot at stake. But then for him to be revealed as Luffy's brother, then more questions came forward at that point. And then you hear the name Whitebeard, and that just throws everything off completely, because who is Whitebeard? And why is Ace his 2nd Division commander? There was so much allure with Ace's first appearance in the story, and to this day, it intrigues fans for many reasons, especially with all the information we have on him now. And at number 9, I have the second son of Big Mom, Katakuri. With this introduction, we were introduced to Future Sight, and with him, there were these many comparisons that were made straight off the bat, because people were absolutely dumbfounded trying to figure out, how do you defeat this man who could see the future? How do you contend with that? Aang Beige, who seemed to be very knowledgeable on the Big Mom pirates, seemed to have no answer for this. He was doing it so effortlessly, reciting people's entire conversations before they even happened. He was so impressive in his first appearance that people thought he could take on the admirals and maybe even win. And to this day, we're still trying to figure out what are the limits of Future Sight and how high it could take your combat ability, and it all started with Katakuri. And next on the list, we have Monkey D. Dragon, which is actually crazy because we didn't know who he was at the time when he saved Luffy against Smoker. He just sort of had this idea that he had Luffy's best interests at heart. And just like Ace, he wanted him to survive. He wanted him to go on and keep living that life that he chose, undeterred by any forces or people in his way. And the thing is, Smoker was actually very powerful in his own right, but Dragon had this emperor presence. And this was before we even knew what emperors were, but Dragon just had that feel to him. He just seemed like an absolute powerhouse from the beginning. And the biggest thing from this introduction is the fact that there are still so many unanswered questions. For characters like Katakuri and Ace, their time is up. We may have seen all there is to see from them. Definitely for Ace, most likely for Katakuri. For Dragon, we haven't even gotten the Conqueror's Haki reveal yet. But maybe even more important than that, the Devil Fruit reveal. Because with his introduction, it was heavily implied that he may have some sort of wind devil fruit. Maybe a wind Loki, or something that allows him to control the weather. Possibilities are actually limitless with what Dragon may be able to do, and what his ultimate role in the story might be moving forward. And at number 7, I have the Marine Admiral Fujitora. And the great thing about it is, from the very beginning, from their very first interaction, Fujitora had taken a liking to Luffy, and he didn't even realize it. There were these thugs trying to take advantage of the Admiral with the fact that he was blind, thinking he was this weak, defenseless old man. Luffy, feeling bad about it, decided to step in and set things straight, because it did not feel right to him at all, watching things go the way they were going. And this upset the thugs, so they wanted to take out revenge on Luffy. Fujitora, being grateful for what Luffy did for him, he decided to protect Luffy in this moment, but still at the same time, he knew they were on opposing sides. We start to get a little bit on Fujitora's ideology and his sense of justice, and that has to do with the fact that he's blind and he doesn't like to see some of the dirty things that are going on in the world. What just happened to him being an example. So on one hand, there's the level of intrigue there on how he blinded himself and what he saw that caused him to blind himself. And then there's the fact, despite of this disability or perceived disability, he is still a Marine Admiral. A blind man has made it to one of the highest ranks in the One Piece world. It just doesn't get much better than that. And one of the greatest impacts of his introduction is the fact that he is not afraid to question authority. Just off the fact that he blinded himself, he's not afraid to risk it all to change the world. So Oda introduced a very interesting character here, and one that might be one of the most important for the story moving forward. And at number 6, I have the former right hand of the Pirate King, Silvers Rayleigh. In the pre-time skip, when the crew was still in their early stages, we had a few glimpses of the old generation with people like Whitebeard and Garp, an old era past their prime but still insanely powerful. Just how powerful, we weren't exactly sure yet, but we started to get a pretty good idea. Rayleigh's introduction put things into great perspective for us. Luffy had come a very long way, he had gained a lot of power, had a very high bounty, and yet still Shaki was telling us how Rayleigh was 100 times stronger than him. But this wasn't just all talk or empty hype. He showed us. He displayed great haki, especially Conqueror's haki. He had one of the first great displays of Conqueror's haki that let us know that this ability is really reserved for kings, people that were above all others. And even today we have people like Blackbeard cautious of this man because of his reputation. At number 5 I have Akainu. Of course you can consider his introduction to Ohara incident, what he did there and how he killed all the Oharans, which is pretty crazy in itself. This man basically committed genocide right before our eyes, wiped out an entire civilization of archaeologists, burned them alive straight up, straying away from the initial plan of his authorities. And this was only when he was a vice admiral. So fast forward when we really got to see who he was in his prime at Marineford, when we actually knew who he was, he absolutely did not disappoint. And the big thing here is this wasn't some fight against weaklings or fodder. This was the war of the best against some of the most powerful pirates in the world, and he stood out. And honestly, he had a few of them looking like fools, especially when Josu threw that big block of ice at him. Akainu just effortlessly melted it away and just made it look like nothing and had them all shocked. On top of that, we had already seen the other admirals. It felt like Oda was saving up for something, that he was building something up with Akainu. Kizaru and Aokiji had already made their moves, but not Akainu, not until later on. All things considered, some may say Akainu was the MVP of the war from start to finish. Next is Kaizan. And the reason he's higher on this list is because he was our first introduction to admirals. It's probably when the admiral stocks were at an all-time high. People in the community probably view them as gods of the One Piece world in some sense, kind of like how people view the Yonko today. Especially with how Aokiji rolled up riding a bike in the middle of the ocean. And then when this giant sea beast was threatening the crew, he was able to stop it, barely even lifting a finger. On top of all of that, he froze the entire sea in one touch. Stuff like that made you think, just what are the admirals? What is this insane power? What are the limits? Who could possibly check these guys? And that's why I have Kaizan's introduction so high, because with his introduction, he carried the weight of the Admiral title and he represented it very, very well. And number 3, I have Mihawk. Mihawk was first introduced in Barati, and the stories they told of him just didn't make any sense what he was able to do, to the point that he had people questioning whether or not he had a devil fruit power. Because how can one man destroy a fleet of 50 ships with no effort whatsoever? He had Jin recollecting the tragic event in absolute terror. He didn't want anything to do with Mihawk or whatever beef he had with Don Krieg. He was shook to the absolute core with this man's presence. The most alarming thing though is the fact that he had no crew. He just travels around in his small boat with the only protection being his black blade. So then you begin to wonder, just how dangerous is this guy that he travels the most dangerous seas in the world like this? No one to back him up, but he's still causing major damage. But then we got to see a small glimpse of his power, and that's when things got really crazy. Zoro, with his most powerful attacks, all 3 of his swords going all out, was stopped by a mere butter knife. Mihawk was so strong that he had Zoro looking like an ant. So at this time you begin to wonder, what does it really mean to be the world's strongest swordsman? Just how high up the ladder do you have to climb to reach these heights? It wasn't really certain, but we knew Mihawk set the bar insanely high, and his introduction led to one of the most character-defining moments in the entire series that people still hark back on till this day, and that's when Zoro made his promise to Luffy. And now with number 2, I have Kaido. It goes without saying, this is one of the most epic and memorable character introductions in the entire series. The very first glimpse we have of him is him attempting to commit suicide by jumping off of a sky island, and yet it did not work. This is a man who challenged the 4 emperors. He was caught by the Navy 18 times. He was tortured thousands of times. He even sank 9 different prison vessels. On top of that, when they tried to kill him, nothing worked. Everything just straight up broke. The spear, the rope, the guillotine. It's as if this man is just straight up immortal. At the end, that's when we get him coming up from the hole he made from jumping from the sky island, and that's when we get to see how massive he is, to the point that he dwarfs the supernova right below him. That's when the mystery starts to get even deeper. Apparently, this is the world's strongest creature, and no one can beat him one-on-one. Of course, he was eventually defeated by Luffy, but his introduction still holds a lot of weight. It's one of the best first appearances for a character in the series by far. But there's one more that I think is even higher than that, and that is Kizaru's introduction, which I have at number 1. And I know a lot of people will probably disagree with this placement, but I think it has so much going for it. It's the fact that it was one of those in-your-face top-tier beatdowns. And it wasn't just a crew. It wasn't just something we heard about either. It was something that we saw happening live. All of the supernova were being manhandled by this admiral. The way he came flying in on top of a cannonball just was so epic. The thing is, with a lot of the characters involved, the first thing you think about is how Kizaru whooped their ass, like a poo. Overall, I feel like Kizaru's introduction is the most memorable in this series. It just straight up has the best replay and reread value, but most importantly, it led to the most pivotal moment in the entire series when the Straw Hats got separated. But those are all my thoughts, and that's my top 10 best character introductions in One Piece. As always, tell me what your top 10 is, and most importantly, tell me what your favorite character introduction in One Piece is overall. Comment all of your thoughts down below, but also don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more videos just like this one.